Hi, everybody, and today we are on the phone talking with Haleh. She's going to be talking about something that everybody kind of has to deal with, whether you are a parent of somebody that has an allergy or just a parent in general, and that is disciplining kids for the non-disciplined parent. And discipline can go into many different ways. There's the behavior problems that discipline can actually work with, but it's also being disciplined on how to be focused on what you need to do, especially like if you have an allergy or a kid with a disability, to train themselves to be safe and disciplined with what they need to do for their daily schedule. So welcome, Haleh, to how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, Jason. Thanks.
What are some examples of various discipline styles?
Okay, I would say that there are two main discipline styles that we can all easily identify. One is the tough guy parent. That's the one who has the charts and the rules and the points, and every child knows exactly what their expectations are, and the parent is very strict on the child, making sure that the child follows the straight and narrow path. Then we have the laid-back style. That's the parent who wants to be their child's friend, who's basically anything goes, lets the child make the decisions for them, gives them the choices, and the parent basically follows what that kid wants. Everyone else pretty much falls between these two extremes.
Now, let's talk about the different types of discipline that you just mentioned. There's the discipline where you got to reprimand somebody for doing some type of action, and then there's also the disciplining somebody to stick to a schedule, stick to what they need to do. Like if they're on a special diet, if they're on a nap schedule or whatever that needs to do. How can you decipher between the two so people don't get it confused when you say I got to discipline somebody to do this and discipline somebody to live their life the way that they need to?
You know, the truth is that they're very similar. A parent who, let's take a case where you're not talking about a child who has a medical issue, where the parent is very concerned about their safety. Let's take the case where the parent just wants their child to eat healthy or make lifestyle choices that they think are desirable to them, rather, maybe religious choices that they want the child to make, rather than disciplining a kid because they're misbehaving. Those are the two types, but the reality is, in order to implement either type, the parent needs to have some kind of authority and some kind of yes and no and clear rules for the kid to follow. And I think this is where so many of us kind of misstep and have a tough time following through. And the truth is, kids like that kind of clear line. So what I want to do is provide parents with how you can do it, even if you're not the kind of parent who can be regimented and disciplined yourself and always follow what you're supposed to do.
Now, how can a non-disciplined parent, somebody that just really hasn't done too much with the child, become a disciplined figure with that child? Because obviously the child probably won't take them seriously at first.
Okay, I would say that there's 5 steps to follow. The very first is the parent needs to exert their authority. So you've got to think in your head, the mom and the dad, they're the king and queen of the house, and you have to exert that type of authority and respect from your children. So simple things like, this is the chair that I sit in, and I always sit in that chair. We laugh about the dad who always has the recliner, and nobody can sit on dad's chair. But the truth is that what that does is it puts in the child's head the parent has a particular space in the house that you can follow through. And when you begin to start as yourself as the authoritarian, the authoritative figure in the home, there are certain things that you do. The child has to knock before they walk into your room. They can't, for younger kids, they can't just walk in the bathroom with you when you're in the bathroom. I know, this obviously is not the case for teenagers, but as kids get older, you can't change in front of them. You have your space, they have their space. You get to eat first. I know this is like a surprise to parents. Usually we just want to feed our kids and get them to be quiet. But you can give them the snack. But when it comes to official dinner time or going out somewhere or picking up food, you've got to serve yourself first. Have your kids open the doors for you. So that's step number 1, to exert the fact that you are an authority, because only people in a position of authority can discipline. So that's number 1. The next is, I like to say, bring back that because I said so line. I think that, coming out of the 70s and 80s and 90s, the whole parenting style that was was enforced then, which has continued well into this 21st century, is that we need to explain to our kids why they should do something. We don't want to have a child who just mindlessly follows. And I think that that's also part of the American lexicon, right? We don't want to be sheep who just follow leaders. But the truth is that you need to have a certain amount of because I said so terminology from a very young age with children so that they know you're the boss, that you're the leader. Sometimes they just have to follow you and listen to what you're saying. This is a little bit harder to implement if you haven't been an authoritative parent in the past. It's a little bit harder to come and say to a 12-year-old, it's because I said so. But I think that you try it, and they get used to it, and they understand. Sometimes you can't explain the reason for everything to them. The next step is punishment. If you're a parent who can't do these chart systems, where you can't make points and you can't follow this regiment of kids earning something and reaching up to a certain level, what can you do to punish your child? If you're not giving allowance to them on a daily basis, what is the punishment? Mainly people say the punishment should fit the crime, and it's very difficult, I think, when a parent is in the heat of the moment with a kid to think of a good punishment that can actually teach a child something. And I have to tell you, I've wrestled with this significantly myself with my children. What am I going to tell them? And I have to tell you, I think I've come up with a punishment that sort of, for the most part, fits all. If a kid does something that they shouldn't do in an environment where they have, whether they're fighting with their sibling, or they're not sitting down at dinner nicely, or they were a wise guy and bad-mouthed you outside the house, get them to clean the space, to clean the physical space. There's always something, especially if you're an undisciplined parent, there's something in your house that needs cleaning, whether you're in your car or whether there's a bag that you're carrying, whatever it is, get them to clean. And I think that what that does is it solidifies in the kid's mind that I need to clean up my act and I need to behave appropriately. So we have exert your authoritative figure. Say because I said so. I gave you a very easy punishment that you could handle. And the last two things, the last 2 points that are very important is, number one, praise your children. If you want to criticize and you want to discipline, make sure that you dole out praise to them. And last, and certainly not least, is praise yourself. You cannot go around criticizing what you do, saying that you're a bad parent. Oh, I have no idea what to do with this kid. This kid is driving me crazy. You can't do that because it shows that you don't know what you're doing. You're not good at what you're doing. You need to praise yourself and say, you know what, I've done a pretty good job with you. I see your clothes are matching. That was nice. Give credit to yourself and take credit, so that the child sees that you're somebody who's worthy of listening to. So these are the 5 tips that I would give for parents who have a little difficulty disciplining and they're non-disciplined, but if you implement any one of these techniques, it will have a ripple effect on your children's behavior.
Now, obviously, sometimes things can get carried away. When does discipline actually cross the line to being something of abuse?
That's a great question, and I have to say, to a certain extent, it is very much dependent on the dynamics of the household. It's very clear to say if somebody has bruises all over their body, is crying because they're constantly being emotionally abused. That's a very clear line. But on the edges, it's a little bit more difficult. Some would say you're abusing your child if you spank them. But it's, I don't want to necessarily say that's absolutely the case. It depends how it's done. Is it done out of anger? Is it something that leaves permanent scar with the children? It gets a little bit difficult. Some would say it's abuse. We're seeing it now in sports, in the sports world, where you have coaches that berate their athletes to such an extent that everyone is saying it's emotional abuse. They're calling me all kinds of racist names just so I can get a basketball in the hoop. But, there's that line where sometimes those negative words are necessary in a way to get somebody to move along and feel the push to do something, and sometimes it crosses the line. And it's a little bit difficult because on those margins, it depends on the big picture relationship of the family. Is there equal doses of positive feedback going on with the child. I think a lot of the ways that our grandparents were raised today might be called abuse, whereas back then it really wasn't considered abuse.
Mm-hmm. Now, the last thing I have for you today
Sure.
is what discipline styles work best and why? Because I've noticed that there have been a lot of controversy over people saying that timeout does not work, especially with the older kids, because it's like, okay, they're going to go sit in a corner and think about things. Well, to them, they're not thinking about things. They're over there just laughing at us. You know, does that work? And if that doesn't work, what other options are there that could really make an impact in the child's life, let them realize what they've done wrong, and maybe bring peace and tranquility to the home?
Time out, I have to say, is something that works when a child is young. If you have a little two-year-old child who's throwing a tantrum, you just need to remove them from the space to cool off, and then they can re-enter. But if you're using time out on a 12-year-old, it's not going to work. They're happy to be away from you. They're trying to exert their independence to begin with. So this is, again, one of those ideas of you need to know what fits for each child at a particular moment. And I got to tell you, I say a prayer for myself all the time with my kids, that I ask God to give me the wisdom to do right by each kid. Because the truth is, discipline is not a one-size-fits-all issue. It is true that you need to have authority as a parent. You need to, as a parent, know that you are the backbone of your home to give guidelines and standards for your kids. This is the big picture of what makes a parent be able to raise children who are orderly, good members of society. But to say that any one discipline style works or doesn't work, it really depends on the child and the parent's relationship and how they're able to impact it and make it work. Generally speaking, kids like order. Kids like order, which is why discipline is a hot topic. You need to give order and guidelines for children. How you give the order, now that's a different issue.
Well, thank you, Haleh, for coming on and talking about some discipline with us, and I hopefully it enlightened other parents to try some new things and not be afraid to put their foot down when they need to.
No problem. Glad to do it, Jason.
Thank you.